Welcome everyone to today's Tech Talk webinar. We will be getting started here shortly. Welcome everyone. We are excited to have you join us today for today's Tech Talk webinar. We're going to be talking today about how to rethink your Windows 11 migration with IGEL, and I am excited to have with us today two wonderful experts. We have Jeremy Ingram. Jeremy is the technical architect at Ferroque Systems. And also with us today is Jamie Halscott, Senior Technology Evangelist with IGEL, and we all would like to welcome you to our session today. I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad you're here to join us today. For those of you who are new to Ferroque, a brief bio of who we are. Since 2007, Ferroque has been at the forefront of digital workspace and innovation and end-user infrastructure. Ferroque is built on a deep foundation of industry leadership and expertise, and our mission is to transform how businesses operate in the digital age. We truly believe that the decisions around technologies implemented by customers is hugely influential on that customer's ability to thrive in their respective industry. Historically, we've executed on our vision by delivering more projects annually than any competitor in our field in North America, which reflects our commitment to excellence in the field of end-user computing and end-user infrastructure. Additionally, Ferroque is an active contributor to the UC and EUI community, and if you haven't already, I would encourage you to visit the resource section of the Ferroque Systems website for a number of blogs that cover technical insights and across multiple vendors and valuable thought leadership. So with that scope of projects delivered annually and an overall sense of obligation to contribute to the wider EUC community, Ferroque is in a unique position to advocate great solutions that are agnostic and can quickly snap into a number of different verticals. So with that in mind, we want to shine a light on the numerous compelling benefits that IGEL implementation can bring to your organization in place of an outright migration from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So for our agenda this afternoon, we've got a number of important issues and opportunities to highlight in enterprise computing today. Rather than forcing a wholesale migration to Windows 11, organizations can achieve superior endpoint security, manageability, and user experience for SaaS, VDI, and browser-based applications by adopting IGEL as a lightweight, centrally managed alternative OS. So to begin our conversation on this topic, Jamie Halscott is kind enough to join us today to cover our agenda items. And following this agenda, we'll discuss our call to action and why you should consider Ferroque to address endpoint modernization in your organization, especially where Windows 10 end-of-life milestones are concerned. Jamie?
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me here, Jeremy. It's really great to be here. Certainly very honored to speak here with Ferroque today and with your customers. I'm Jamie Halscott. Thank you for introducing me. I'm the Senior Technology Evangelist at IGEL. What that means is I'm aligned with the Global Alliances team. So our strategic partners, our strategic independent software vendors, hardware vendors, everyone who comes together to make the IGEL ecosystem work, and particularly our great partners like Ferroque. So I know we started out a little bit, Jeremy, with talking about who is Ferroque, but I know you had a specific slide about it. I didn't know if you wanted to go through that a little bit more in depth. If you wanted anything else you wanted to share about Ferroque and the things that you do, particularly your tremendous partnership with IGEL and then the great work that you've done with us. I'm going to turn it over to you for this, and then I'll let you go through the actual agenda slide again, and we can kind of make sure that everyone understands what we're going to be doing here.
Yeah, thanks very much. But to be honest, I think we've covered that. I'm really looking forward to getting into your material today. So as far as our agenda item is concerned, again, all tying back to that, to a really great conversation on why you should rethink your Windows 11 migration strategy and seriously consider an adoption of the IGEL OS. So,
all right,
let's get to it, Jamie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, so we have our agenda there. I'm going to try and cover this. I don't like to get too technically in the weeds. I'll give you just enough tech to make you understand exactly what we do and how we do it. But also I want to frame this here with not just what we do technically, but how we're going to align with the business goals of this monster that's coming, right? This Windows 11 migration. And a lot of you will say, why is this super important? Well, it matters, right? We have a timeline on this. This was a great one I found from the mildly infuriating subreddit about Windows 10 support ending in October of 2025. We're right almost to the day at 90 days away from that. So the mainstream support is going to go away. That leaves you with a lot of problems here. Obviously, Windows systems are pretty reliable, but without a supported operating system, Murphy's Law dictates you're going to have a lot of problems as new updates are released for various different applications, new drivers, other things you're going to need. They simply may not work the way you want them to. So planning for that now and not bleeding into, kind of a day one plus for that migration is going to be great for you. So we got some options, right? Obviously, I'm going to tell you about IGEL and how great we are, but you have lots of options, right? You can replace those Windows 10 systems, basically replace the Windows 10 itself on supported systems, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. We'll talk a little bit about that. You can go out and buy new systems, right? I mean, certainly if you have unlimited budget, you can replace everything in your organization, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 PCs. Go ahead and get yourself the latest, greatest Windows 11 systems from a supported vendor. And if you are able to do that, if you're able to get that approved by your financial people, let me know, because I've never been able to do that. So maybe you have unlimited capital. I don't know, but I'm not Bezos or Gates or any of those kind of guys. I'm not even Mark Cuban, so I don't have $1 billion to spend on redoing things. So we're going to talk about cost savings in that. We have another option too, right? And that's really what we're talking about here is that modernization of your endpoints, replacing Windows on the endpoint with something else. And there's a lot of options for that. And then you have my favorite option, right? And that's just give up IT completely. Embrace the hermit life, live in the woods in a nice little cabin with a little bubbling stream going by you. That's the option I've opted for. But unfortunately, as a long married man, my wife doesn't like those options. So I have to stay in the IT world and live in this for a long time. So let's talk about some of these challenges, right? What do we want to do first? We want to talk about upgrading Windows 10 to Windows 11. But there's caveats. Most of you are going to be very familiar with these caveats at this point. But the biggest here is the hardware compatibility. Even if you had the software compatibility squared away, if you don't have things like the modern TPM, right, the Trusted Platform Module 2.0, you're going to have a hard time. For a while there, you could kind of disable it and kind of hack it to work, but recent revisions to Windows 11 have made that impossible. So, I really feel bad for you if you went down that path. You're just not going to be able to get it to work, and it's really sad because a lot of those systems are modern. Right, talking about systems sometimes 5 years, maybe 6 years old, just got right before COVID. Let's say that you picked up some new systems, they're not going to work, and that's a challenge. But there's ways we can fix that, so we'll talk about that.
To give one point of context, important point of context, just to how widespread a problem this is on the Windows 10 end of life and Windows 11 adoption. The chatter in the industry is somewhere around 250 million affected devices in enterprise environments today won't meet the minimum requirements for Windows 11.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. And in fact, I was messing around the other day and Windows 10 PCs that can't run Windows 11, they're pretty much giving them away at this point. I got one for a test lab here, and I think I paid about $70 for it, US. So, and it was very modern. It just doesn't have a TPM 2.0. So it went into my IGEL lab for a little teaser there. But all right, so that's option one, right? We want to upgrade this. Well, what other challenges do we have? One of the biggest things we found is not so much getting to Windows 11 itself, but Windows 11 playing nicely with Windows 11. Anyone who's used Windows 11 has found that it was pretty stable out of the gate, maybe a little bit clunky, but once you started to upgrade it, all right, particularly the biggest challenge we found was when you go from something like the 23H2 update to the 24H2 update, it was breaking everything. breaking webcams, breaking audio drivers, breaking network stacks. I have a horror story from one of our customers that had a tremendous amount of Lenovo devices where the networking just stops working, both wired and wireless. And you can roll it back, but when you roll it back, other things started breaking, like Teams started breaking, and they said we just can't have this. Right, we need our Windows platforms to be reliable, and we can't do this. And I think there's been something around a dozen different builds of the 24H2 that are making the rounds to try and address these issues, but each one has a problem. And I give Microsoft tremendous credit, having to work with so many different pieces of hardware, so many different pieces of software. It's just challenging, but when you have such a big code base, you're going to run into these problems. So even if you can manage to get to Windows 11, it's proving to be a nightmare for a lot of our customers. Okay, well, let's talk about, let's start from scratch. Let's get a new system. Let's go out and buy the latest, greatest thing, right? And I'm not a political guy. I don't speak about politics, but everybody's talking about things from tariffs to inflation to supply chain interruptions. We saw it during COVID. We saw supply chain interruptions and unavailability of things. A lot of our partners are having a hard time getting exactly what they need to service demand in these areas. So again, if you have unlimited budget, this is a great option. If you want to stay with Windows, that's certainly an option. But the challenge here is, best case scenario, you spend a lot of money and you still get all of the challenges that Windows brought to you, even in Windows 10. So we'll talk about mitigating some of those. So that brings us to our next one, right? Replacing Windows at the endpoint. And obviously, this is the one. Shameless promotion plug. I'm here from IGEL. That's what we do. So let's look at those things, right? What's really going to be a viable option, right? Is Mac OS viable? Not really. Enterprise management has been a tremendous challenge for that, along with application compatibility. In fact, when you look at things like the usage of Azure Virtual Desktop, IGEL is actually the #2 platform ahead of Mac OS in using that. So there's Mac OS is interesting. But it's not something that I would use in a large business or an enterprise for a number of different reasons. Very solid, very secure, but not the compatibility that we expect. So what about Linux? Right. And a lot of the websites out there, like How to Geek and other ones, have said, why don't you look at Linux as an alternative to Windows 11? Maybe it works better for you now. But again, the challenges with that are application compatibility. Getting users used to the way that it looks and feels, and certainly the management, right? The management suite and tools for Windows has evolved tremendously over the years. For Linux, it really hasn't. So when we look at a solution that we want to roll out across a large company, hell, even a smaller mid-sized business, we want to roll out some kind of management framework for our Linux systems, it just really isn't there. So I'm going to talk about some options that we have for that. And then, of course, the last one, and my favorite, which unfortunately I'll never be able to embrace, is embracing nature and running away. And we're simply not going to be able to do that. We live in a world now that's connected all the time. Everything requires us to have access to the internet, access to our computing, at business, at home. It doesn't really matter. And now we're finding that it's only going to get worse as time goes on. So what do we do about this, right? What's the real solution? What am I telling you to do here? Well, obviously, I'm talking about IGEL. I'm from IGEL. There's what you see is what you get here. IGEL is the secure endpoint OS platform for now and next. Our focus is to be security out of the gate. If Windows had started yesterday or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, IGEL's been around for 25 years. If Windows had started 25 years later, they certainly would be doing this exact same thing. They would start from the ground up with security, understanding you're in a connected world, understanding that your applications need to be validated and only run the way that you want, almost in a utility type of computing for your enterprise. And our offering is a platform. Right? I half joke that the IGEL OS doesn't do anything. IGEL OS sits on top of your hardware. It runs the basic functions you need, the communications with your networking stack, with your CPU, your RAM, your hard disks, anything that you need, solid states, anything that's running in the hardware level, IGEL OS does that and provides a secure framework to be enabled by all of our partners in our ecosystem. So I'll show you how that works. And it's designed for what's now and for what's next. So not only solving those problems now, but what does a 10-year plan look like when you're using IGEL at the endpoint? So let's talk a little bit more about what IGEL actually does, right? Our whole goal here is to save you significant amounts of money. CapEx, OpEx. It's to standardize and simplify that user experience. We want everyone to get a look and feel that's familiar, but at the same time, only what they need to perform their job functions. It's going to support that wide array of ecosystem partners for those technologies and applications that we want to deliver, and the tools that are needed to support it. We have an entire management suite that comes with IGEL OS. And we want to make sure that we offer that most secure endpoint. The number one place for vulnerability is going to come from the endpoint. It isn't your super hardened firewalls and your switches in your data center, your servers that are following your guidelines that are hardened based on NIST standards or any kind of other standards you're using to make sure that it's hardened. Your problems are coming from the endpoint where someone can touch and feel it. In fact, following Microsoft's the immutable laws of security, I think rule number one was if the bad guy has access to your system, it's not your system. And that bad guy, unfortunately, is sometimes an employee or simply someone who has access to a system that you don't want that to. And what we're trying to do is remove complexity, right? When a lot of people think of, say, any kind of Linux-based operating system, any kind of alternative operating system, that sounds complex. It sounds difficult to manage. It sounds difficult to learn. It's difficult to deploy and then centrally control. And we're going to take all that away with IGEL OS. So how do we do this? Well, core to that is what we call our preventative security model. And what that's going to do here is replace that traditional monitor, detect, remediate, where we know that the bad guys are going to get in. We know we're going to get ransomware, malware. We know there's going to be vulnerabilities that can be exploited. What do we do about that? We eliminate that completely. That is a thing of the past. And in fact, IGEL OS has never been hacked. It's designed not to be hackable. It is designed to be a hardened core OS, which is read-only. So when we deploy it, everything from the moment that system boots through the BIOS or UEFI all the way till you load the applications, everything is checksummed. If it doesn't validate, it doesn't run. And if it's damaged somehow, if you go in and delete files, do something to damage it and reboot it, it goes right back to its known good state. Again, all checksummed and validated. Only changes that we push from our management console are going to be applied to those systems. So it's modular. There's nothing on it except what you need. If you're running Citrix, an AVD, a Windows 365, an Omnissa, Parallels, Dision, doesn't matter what kind of VDI you're running. If you're running any number of browsers, all of those, you only load the apps that you need centrally and control how they're configured and what they look like for the end users. Any data that might be on the system, which it doesn't actually hold any data, but everything in RAM that's used is all encrypted. So even if a system were to be compromised somehow, there's really nothing to read. If you look at the IGEL OS, if you try to look at the disk itself where IGEL OS is installed, it's all encrypted. There's nothing to be gained by an attacker, and we don't actually store any local data. So the device really becomes stateless. You're not managing user profiles and things like you would in a Windows environment. But what we do is we manage identities. So that integrates with any number of different multi-factor and single sign-on providers. Whatever your IDP is, whether it's Entra ID, Workspace ONE, Ping, Okta, we don't care. We're vendor agnostic when it comes to how you log into and operate IGEL OS, and we can pass those credentials on all the way through to the applications that you're using. But the goal here, again, was to prevent the endpoint ransomware, prevent malware, and enable the building of a zero trust network architecture where at the endpoint, your most vulnerable space is going to be protected by IGEL. And again, we say reducing the attack surface by 95%. That's really, really conservative of us. It's as close to zero as it can get. And what does that really enable us to do? And we call this our adaptive secure desktop. And it builds on top of that preventative security model. And there's going to be, in our case, 5 different deployment methodologies that we use to ensure that things are working the way you want them to. IGEL OS is not a thin client OS. IGEL OS is not a thick fat client like Windows. It's somewhere in between. What it enables us to do is deliver only what the user needs with a minimal attack surface, extremely high performance. I mean, this runs on systems with 4 gigs of RAM, dual core processors. It runs like a brand new system, and it reduces that complexity and cost. So this, I'll go into a little bit more about these deployment methodologies shortly, but as you can see here, we can deliver through your VDI and DAS providers, like I mentioned before. We have a whole suite of browsers, including like the Island Enterprise browser, Firefox, Chromium, Edge. Those are all supported by us as well. We have the entire ability to run the Office suite and the Google suite through Progressive Web Apps, which is our third deployment pillar. We have native applications, everything from IntelliJ for coding to Visual Studio Code to running native Teams, Zoom, WebEx. All of those that don't typically work well in a VDI or DAS environment, we can run those locally on IGEL OS. And then we have something even more interesting. I used to say that IGEL OS fits about 80% of the users in an environment. And we have a new deployment methodology, which is actually an integrated hypervisor. So we can use that for things like IoT, things like OT, where you have to run legacy Windows, where you can't change the operating system, but you still want it to be encapsulated in that same kind of immutable function, where we can deploy Windows, deploy Linux, deploy whatever we need to onto that, start it, stop it, wipe it remotely, and even go back to a known good state. So we can bring a lot of that power and immutability that we would get from IGEL OS into a containerized Windows environment. So I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But it's really easy to get to. Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Jamie, just one quick word on the Adaptive Secure Desktop, especially for attendees who may be joining us, really who didn't attend Now and Next in Miami last March. But as far as the announcements at Now and Next, the Adaptive Secure Desktop, to me, this really resonated. And if you haven't already, I'd encourage people to go back and look at the keynotes and maybe any of the other material on the Adaptive Secure Desktop that have been published. But a really, really eloquent approach to endpoint management and just overall environment integrity in organizations. And something I think we're going to see driving a lot of conversations across a number of vendors moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate that, and this is going to continue to evolve. We'll get to a point here where you can run those. And maybe you don't have a VDI or a DAS, or you can't find an application to run as a progressive web app, and you really, really need some kind of Windows app to run. One of the core use cases that we found was an engineering company. They had tremendously expensive $5,000, $10,000 CAD workstations that didn't support Windows 11. And they said, uh-oh, what do we do about this? Well, we can actually emulate the TPM 2.0 in a virtual way, and we can run Windows 11 on unsupported hardware. So they're actually able to, for a lot of their users that are in the normal administrative functions, types of standardized functions, be able to use IGEL for everything. And then for those heavy CAD users, they can offload that to the hypervisor, run a full Windows 11 instance, running just the CAD that they want to run, and they're able to do so. And again, bringing that extra layer of protection on top, if they were somehow to get compromised inside of that, that kind of bubble, so to speak, centrally from our unified management suite, they could roll back. They could restart those VMs and go back to a known good state. So it's used really only for that one application in their case. And we didn't even think about that as a use case. We were thinking of this for supporting legacy Windows and some of those IoT and OT use cases, which has been tremendously popular for. But we're continuing to increase what we do with the hypervisor, containerization of applications and things that will allow us to have the broadest support, but all still working within the framework of that preventative security model. So really, really big things to come from that.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And incredibly appealing, especially where there's compliance considerations that are imposed for systems for running supported OSs on supported hardware. We could spend all day on it. It's my favorite part of Now Next.
There's a lot. There's actually a really big OEM out there, a really big OEM vendor that came to us and said, we have these legacy ATMs all over the world. They're not allowed to be connected because they're running Windows 98. They're standalone devices. They're certified with this hardware. They can't run anything else. How can you help us? So that's how we got to this, where we could centrally manage tens of thousands of ATMs all over the world. They could safely connect them and network them again. The network traffic doesn't flow in or out of them at all. It's all encapsulated within IGEL OS there. We can actually emulate the exact processor models and things they need in order to run that. So we bring all these benefits of our preventative security model all the way back to Windows 98. So there's a lot of cool features that we can do. And I think we have probably 100 or so different use cases that we've come up with running that. So, but how do we get there, right? You're going to say this is complex. How do we actually get IGEL OS, right? And we just say simply IGEL it, because I think just IGEL it would have probably gone a little bit too close to the Nike, but simply IGEL it, right? And that's what we do. And there's three different main models that we use to do this. There's actually a fourth, and we'll talk about it a little bit. But we can actually install IGEL specifically onto the devices. And those devices are available. We have OEM partners like HP, Lenovo, LG that actually ship IGEL pre-installed, as well as dozens of other hardware vendors. They will ship it installed. We can repurpose running on legacy x86 64 hardware, things like dual core processors that are 7-10 years old. I make a joke in my lab here. I have some old HP, I think they're EliteBook 840 G1s, circa 2013, 2014. Those are my main IGEL demo and test lab devices. They just run. So we're looking at things that are way beyond their usable life cycle that run IGEL like it's a brand new machine. So we have lots of options there for running IGEL. We can do a BYO as well. If you want to bring your own device, what we found that's particularly compelling, we can load IGEL OS either into a device that we have, or you can roll your own, and you can run it from that thumb drive, right? USB-C, USB-A, doesn't really matter to us. But you could give this to someone. So you have a remote worker, maybe a call center employee that has their own system. You want to save cost. You can roll this for them. They plug it in, boots up in IGEL OS. They can run everything they need to do at the end of the day, shut it down, take it out, boot back to their home PC and Windows. Again, we have no interaction between the Windows that's on there and the IGEL OS on the thumb drive, which can't be modified, can't be tampered with, can't be compromised. It's all encrypted. All of those security features they can do. So it really extends the BYOD concept to a lot more companies in a secure and compliant manner. And then we have the emergency recovery, right? If you're not ready for an entire IGEL experience, we have various different business continuity and disaster recovery SKUs available where you can have this functionality but not have to pay the normal full price for IGEL OS in order to get those kinds of functions. This is particularly powerful in healthcare, where we're seeing these HIPAA requirements now that are getting us to a 72-hour recovery window. I don't know if you've ever been in a hospital or healthcare environment. That's almost impossible to do that, particularly when you're dealing with 5, 10, 15,000 devices spread across dozens of campuses. So this is making industries think about that and think about things like isolated recovery environments and using IGEL in a business continuity disaster recovery mechanism. And also, too, speaking of healthcare, we have our own specific IGEL Imprivata integration, which is unique in the industry, where we can do the tap and go with the badges into workflows for HMR and EMR, like Epic, completely unique to IGEL, even more so than you could do in Windows. So let's just kind of review those application choices and the way that we do things. Again, we've got the hosted apps, VDI, DAS, which you traditionally would think about, your Citrix, your Omnissa, your AVD, Windows 365, Parallels, Dision, Chasm. If you can think of a VDI DAS type provider, we support it. We're the Switzerland of operating systems. We don't sell any of that, so we obviously support everybody to make sure you can choose the best of breed. And Ferroque deals with all of those as well. So making sure that you have a trusted partner that understands not just IGEL, but how IGEL fits into an ecosystem for you. We want to bend IGEL around your business, not the other way around. Again, we support all kinds of browsers, from the types of generic browsers that you're expecting up to things like the Island Secure browser. And in some cases, we found customers can do everything with a browser, and with that, it's kind of the holy grail of application delivery. Fire up a browser, secure browser on IGEL, and you don't have to do anything else. For those apps you want to run locally, we have a complete engine for progressive web apps. We even have an application that you can download from our app portal into your IGEL environment, and you can build your own progressive web apps. So this is great for a lot of the UCC apps like that you want to use for your chat or your voice, any of the web RTC communications. If you can think about it, we've either built it or it runs as a native IGEL app, which is our next category. And then we talked about the IGEL Managed Hypervisor, and there's going to be some more deployment choices coming soon. So I talked about the business continuity options a little bit. And, what we wanted to just do is just kind of review that. One other item I didn't talk about was our dual boot mode. And we've just recently introduced this. We actually had to change completely the way that our bootloader runs because, as I mentioned earlier, From the moment you boot through UEFI, BIOS, all the way through your applications loading, everything has to be checksummed. So we have to take into account the fact that Windows might be there too, and how to address this and how to deal with that and how to isolate us from them. So we actually just included that, which again is another way where we can actually preload IGEL onto a Windows device as a secondary option, and then be able to boot into it for a disaster recovery environment. So very, very powerful there in what we do. And then when you get to IGEL itself, I talked about deploying it, right? And I think, if you put it on a thumb drive, there's any number of different ways we can deploy IGEL OS. We can use SCCM, we can use Pixie Boot, we can really, across the enterprise, deploy IGEL in any number of different ways. But you don't even have to onboard the end users. They can do it themselves. So you can register things like your Entra ID with IGEL, and you can put it into our cloud services, which is your cloud services, all secure. Put in the connectors that you want. And when I got to IGEL, I was given an IGEL device on day one, and I said, I've never used this before. And they said, that's fine, just put in your email address and here's your password. I did all that. It immediately popped up for my two-factor and everything that I needed, showed the standard Entra ID connections. I went ahead and then deposited onto my desktop all of the applications that I needed and everything that I was going to need to perform my job function, without having to do anything on the device itself. And if you don't have that, you can always use simply putting your UMS, your Universal Management Suite server in there, and then your passcodes for your users, which you can generate for them, and the user can then do it themselves. But again, we have this entire onboarding service that's available so that it can make it as simple for 100 as it is for 100,000. So let's look at our ecosystem real quick. And this is kind of a good way to graphically show what we look like. We're going to connect to any number of different providers. I talked about the VDI, DAS functions. I look here at browsers, right? When we're looking at running any number of different SaaS applications, those will all run. We can run full published desktops. We can run just published applications if, say, you're in a Citrix environment or Omnissa environment, whatever that may be, all controlled by our cloud services and by our UMS for any number of devices from any number of vendors, no matter what that form factor is. So one of the fun things we like to say is Dell abandoned a lot of their thin clients. All of a sudden, they require 8 gigabytes of RAM to run things, even though they might only be 2 years old. We've had a lot of our customers come to us and say, "Can we run IGEL on it?" Well, absolutely. So we have an entire line of those Dell-wise thin clients that will actually run IGEL just as fast as they would run any kind of Dell operating system on there. So we can run on thin hardware, we can run on all-in-ones, we can run on mobile thin clients, and we can run on full desktop environments. I think I've got an HP Z workstation running IGEL here. So lots of different options for us, and that all falls under our ecosystem. And that ecosystem is tremendously broad. If you want to check it out for yourself, you can just open up any standard web browser and navigate to app.igel.com. And you'll see all of the different items that we have. Right now, there's about 50 different partner apps in there. There's about 120 partners that are building apps currently for that, and it covers the whole gamut. SaaS, VDI, DAS, security, enterprise browsers, all kinds of support for different hardware like dictation, speech mics, any kind of monitoring decks that we support, unified communications, every peripheral you could really think of, we have some support for. And this is what the IGEL Ready ecosystem looks like right now. As you can see, there's pretty much a name for everything here. So whether it's going to be that VDI, whether it's going to be SaaS apps, whether it's going to be identity and access management, unified endpoint management, any kind of secure communications. So if you want to run through something like a Zscaler or a Palo Alto, you can run through those directly on IGEL as well. You can see all the different groups that we support. And then, of course, any kinds of DEX and SIM modules, SOAR, anything that you would want to use for any kind of security and compliance. So this isn't designed to be a small and mid-sized business product. It's designed to be an enterprise product that is very easy to use and live with in the SMB space. And for those peripherals that we don't support, we've got a couple other tricks up our sleeves here. We just recently introduced as well in Miami back in March, the advanced device redirection. One of the biggest challenges when you're working with any kind of VDI or DAS is you have these specialized peripherals, whether they be signature tablets, credit card readers, anything, particularly in a retail space, that you need to be able to be passed through effectively to whatever that session is. So we'll use them natively, but a lot of the challenges are saying, I maybe have Windows in the cloud, I want to pass through my speech mic. I want to pass through my peripherals. How do I do that? So for us, whether it's USB devices, whether it's serial port devices, webcams, scanners, biometrics, signature pads, we don't care. We're going to do that. And when we use our advanced device redirection, we are going to support all of the major vendors. Again, we're the Switzerland of operating systems. We don't care if it's Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, Horizon, Amazon Workspaces. All of those are going to work through this. We can handle very well, high latency types of connections. So if it's high latency, we can support that. We don't add any latency to that. We can support multi-hop scenarios. We have the ability, if you're in a Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session, that we can isolate those devices on a per session basis, and it's going to fully isolate those for security and compliance reasons. So really easy. Not worrying about all of a sudden going from Windows and saying, how do my peripherals work now? I have these specialized printers, specialized devices. What do they look like? And they're all going to work. And if you're worried about printing, we have partnerships with companies like Vasion for their printing and their ability to print pretty much anywhere, fully supported and natively working in IGEL OS. So one last kind of technical thing before we talk about why are we doing this. How is it all managed? And what we're looking at here is something called our UMS. Right now, version 12 is what ships. And in our UMS, you can control everything. Which apps are deployed to which systems, where, from where, based on what criteria, what are the default versions of those applications, what do you want the settings to be for each of those applications. If you wanted to launch a browser, say in kiosk mode and only go to a particular item, you can do that. If you wanted to load digital signage and do nothing else, you can do that. This controls and centrally locks down exactly how it works. And again, we're so agnostic here that our UMS runs on Windows and Linux, and all kinds of different flavors of them. So we don't even care where you put the UMS. We support multiple different databases. We have our own included one, which works very well, up to about 5,000 devices. It works beyond that, but 5,000 is a great scalability for it. And we can put that as a standalone. We can put that in a clustered environment. We can make it geographically distributed. It all depends on how fault tolerant and what kind of experience you want. But the really great part about this is we license IGEL OS. All the features that come from UMS 12 are free. We don't charge for UMS. UMS licenses come with IGEL OS. If you have 10,000, it doesn't matter how you want to deploy it. We don't charge you some kind of ridiculous high availability fee if you want to cluster your UMS. No, we decided that we wanted an operating system to have the management tools it needs to deploy and secure the environment out of the box. So that's part of the core offering. So we don't charge any additional for that UMS and the functionality for it. So that's the technical aspect of it. So why are we doing this? What are we trying to get you to do here? We're trying to get you to rethink that endpoint strategy. What we've seen before is when we're using legacy Windows, we have challenges with you need high performance hardware, which is expensive. It's got a really quick refresh cycle. Like I said, some of these things being 5 years old and not having a TPM 2.0, that's just not acceptable. When you've made an expensive investment, you want to use that equipment until it dies. You don't want planned obsolescence, and we don't do that. We don't want to add management agents and security agents. We don't need those with IGEL OS. We support them, right? We support things like Windows Defender. We're building for CrowdStrike, for Palo Alto, for many different security providers, so that you can have that confidence in knowing if you want to put it on there, you want visibility, you have particular compliance needs that say you have to run a security agent across it. We can do that, but we don't require it. And that's a very different way of looking at things. Also, there's the high OpEx, the testing, the patching, the managing, the monitoring. In one instance, we had a customer of ours that had, for their team of Windows admins, they had 500 of them, right? This is a huge retailer. They brought it down to 5 managing their IGEL environment because it simply doesn't need the same level of babysitting. If an IGEL device dies, you put another one in place. It gets the identity and information that you want it to get. There's no setup for the user. There's nothing. It's just a device that does exactly what it is. It really is truly enterprise utility computing, right? We say EUC is end user computing, but a great friend of mine, Mark Templeton, former CEO of Citrix, said it's really enterprise utility computing, and that's what we're trying to do here: is make this like a device that you plug in and it does what you want it to do. So what we found is that if you look at the cost of a Windows infrastructure, you're paying about $1 million per 1,000 devices per year to deploy it, secure it, manage it, everything. We find on average, we see about a 75% drop in that cost. And we did a survey of about 67 different large customers of ours. And large went from, say, 1,000 devices to 10,000 devices, with all kinds of different verticals rolled in there. And we found that that was pretty much consistent. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of other examples because these aren't things that we're just making up these numbers. We actually have a tool that's available to us that allows us to calculate your ROI and TCO by switching to IGEL. What that allows us to take into account is everything. Reduced risks from cybersecurity incidences. If you had a cybersecurity incident before, what did it cost to get back? Things like insurance premiums that might change as a result of running IGEL OS at the endpoint, any kind of reduced labor costs, reduction of your security agents and management agents, all that comes in there. One of our healthcare customers had 40,000 endpoints. They realized over a 3-year period a greater than 90% savings by switching to IGEL from Windows. So that was a tremendous way to look at this and see this isn't something that we're spending money on, it's something that we're saving money on. Similarly, we have other verticals that we've worked with, right? Here's an energy example with 21,000 endpoints. And we can look at here everything from their reduced costs to avoiding their recurring costs to increasing the productivity of users. We don't think about that a lot. But if you have someone who's waiting a minute to log into a VDI session, or their workflow takes too long and it takes them 2 minutes to log in versus 15 seconds or 30 seconds, that adds up. Over 10,000 clinicians over a year-long period. So all of those cost benefits can be put into our ROI TCO calculator to come up with exactly what you want. And it, as honest as you are with us and with Ferroque Systems, who's going to be helping you with this, is how much you're going to see those benefits. And so I get one last one here, and I say that because not everybody on this call has 40,000 or 21,000 endpoints. So I chose a very reasonable 1,600 endpoint environment here. And even in their case, we saw a tremendous savings, 1.69 million in recurring costs that were avoided. And that was the cost of PC upgrades and labor to do that, because IGEL OS is really simple to install. Again, reduced IT time spent with ransomware, securing endpoints, training users. That came to about 977,000 in savings over that same time period. Risk mitigation, which is something that you can calculate with us and you can tell us how important or not that is. They saw about a $253,000 risk mitigation savings, and then of course reduced costs. So help desk calls, because there's not really much to do with IGEL. It works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, you can put in a new device, fire it up, and it's exactly the same as your old device. Reduce costs of those management tools. You can eliminate things like VPNs, because we have secure communication between our UMS and the devices, no matter where they are on the planet. And it really helps us to calculate this. So another great thing about IGEL, particularly when we're working with a partner like Ferroque, we've made this ROI TCO calculator available to them, and they're able to run those calculations with you based on whatever information you give them at no charge to you. So we don't charge for that either. It's just another benefit of helping you see and make that cost justification. So I spent many years as a CTO. Nothing that, no matter how cheap it was, got through unless I could cost justify it to my CFOs. So that's what we do here. We want to make sure that you can cost justify that. So that's pretty much IGEL in a nutshell. What we do technically, how we do it from a cost justification standpoint. And I'm going to turn it back to Jeremy to tell you, more about why we work with Ferroque so closely and what kind of benefits that they can provide to you.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. Great content, great delivery, great topic, and great insights, really all around. I think we could spend all day. I think we could stretch this call out through the afternoon. This Windows 11 topic is rich. The adaptive secure desktop and preventative security models are really eloquent and, like I mentioned, really challenging the UC players to communicate overall vision in endpoint management that's as complete and comprehensive as IGEL's is. In terms of why Ferroque, I'm going to go off script a bit here. I don't necessarily want to repeat my talking points from the beginning, but I think it's imperative to kind of to leave you with some final thoughts to take back to your organizations. And it kind of comes back to one statement, I think, and frankly, I think that the theory that you must upgrade your environment endpoints to Windows 11 is a conspiracy theory. And as we continue to move towards realizing these these Windows 10 lifecycle milestones, that upgrade to Windows 11 is not mandatory. Additional options do exist, and for implementation of an endpoint management strategy that is secure, lightweight, and gives us a client OS that can run on virtually any hardware, IGEL significantly helps us realize some massive savings here in support processes while simplifying endpoint procurement and deployment as well. You mentioned Mark Templeton, of course, former Citrix Systems CEO, IGEL Now Next keynote speaker, and member of Ferroque's advisory board. But to paraphrase a bit from Mark, some points that he talks about specific to IGEL that resonate with me. Traditionally endpoints, enterprise IT have revolved around that Windows desktop and local apps. But over the past decade, there's obviously been a huge shift to web apps and services, to the point where typically web apps now are outnumbering the number of local apps running within an organization today. So it's glaringly obvious that the traditional endpoint is facing some challenges that we need to ask ourselves about. Additionally, the endpoint is the weakest link in the overall environment integrity and security posture. So there's increased urgency around enterprise security, and it's grown to the point where security is not merely a priority, but a strategic imperative. Traditionally, enterprise security has been reactive in responding to threats after they occur. Windows 11 economics aside, and we consider the opportunity cost of securing your environments and your estates. Implementation of IGEL OS and the preventative security model not only reduces that threat footprint typically associated with Windows endpoints, but it also aligns with your zero trust policies to prevent modern threats. So in terms of the future of enterprise IT, it lies on the convergence of secure browsers, modern web apps, and streamed Windows apps within a verifiable, secure environment. And we're securely broadcasting data and apps and workflows from a seamless grid of cloud and on-premise compute factories. And quite frankly, the Windows Desktop OS is no longer the best conduit to deliver those services to users. So I'll just leave that as a takeaway for today. And as we move on to our calls to action, I'd like to encourage all of our attendees and viewers online to reach out to Ferroque to build an ROI calculation for deploying IGEL instead of Windows 11, to determine what a realistic time frame is to deploy an IGEL POC in your environments, and to determine how IGEL will complement and modernize your business continuity planning within your organizations.
Fantastic. Wonderful session, guys. I'm going to now open this up for any questions that might come from the audience. So if you do have a question in the audience, please feel free to add it into the question icon on your screen, and we'll try to get to as many of these during our hour session as we can. So feel free, if you do have a question, please add it in, and we'll be looking for those. As we're waiting for a few of those, I do think that we have received a couple of questions earlier, and I just wanted to maybe start out with Jamie, maybe you could add a little bit more about how IGEL works when you address Windows 10 IoT devices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Windows 10 IoT is kind of an interesting animal, right? It's full Windows, but not quite, but kind of works on lower powered hardware, but kind of doesn't. And it's really designed for those special use cases where you're trying to do a lot of what IGEL does, but without the same level of flexibility. What we're really doing in those environments is we're able to wholesale replace that. And we find that typically most of those use cases for the Win 10 IoT would be maybe in those, again, IoT or OT spaces. But you're still having to rely on the fact that, number one, underneath it's Windows with the same vulnerabilities, the same issues, the same need for security tools, the same cost of management as a full-blown Windows, just maybe licensed a little bit differently. You gain some benefits in supportability versus the Windows 10 end of life here. But it also makes you wonder, how much, if you can extend that support for Windows 10 IoT, but not Windows 10, what's the real angle there? So I'm a bit jaded, having been in this industry for 30 years. But if you can support a platform, you should support the platform end to end, not just a variant of it. But IGEL specifically replaces the need both for Windows 10 IoT as well as standard Windows 10 or Windows 11 in the environment.
Excellent. Very, very good to know.
Maybe one additional point to that too. I mean, we in end user computing, we talk, we harp on the user experience all the time, but let's take a moment to recognize the quality of life of our administrators and just the challenges around potentially managing multiple endpoint platforms. Not ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. So we do have another question. I guess, what are the cost considerations, Jamie, of adopting IGEL? I know you went through a pretty good ROI calculator, but just kind of at a high level, what should customers expect in terms of cost?
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically find that IGEL, again, licensed as itself, doesn't require those additional security and management agents. As I mentioned, UMS 12 is included. So again, whether you have one IGEL OS license or 1,000 or 10,000, you're getting UMS, and you can build that in any way you want. So being able to, I always say, and I'm not kidding, managing 10 is as easy as managing 10,000. It's really, or I guess it should be the other way. Managing 10,000 is easy as managing 10, but it's really simple to do. And to do that across the entire enterprise based on any number of criteria. So those cost considerations of IT administration, of the potential for misconfiguration, user error in configuration, anything that might impact the user experience, all of those things go away. So we're really seeing a tremendous reduction in support cost, the incident response cost that we see with things like ransomware and malware, the types of disaster recovery scenarios that have to be planned around this. We have some insane disaster recovery scenarios we've heard from our customers where they have entirely rented trucks full of laptops. I'm not kidding. And that they roll out tens of thousands of laptops that they would have to provision in the case of a ransomware attack. That's just not sustainable. I mean, these costs are insane that they have. That's why we've seen the things like our business continuity and disaster recovery SKU being so popular. Things like the dual boot that allows us to boot into, say, an isolated recovery environment, particularly in healthcare. It's very powerful right now. All of those things. So we're trying to save those costs, not just your costs for additional outlay of hardware and software, but also those personnel costs that you can now devote to other projects, because we know that IT projects are never getting smaller. There's always more. There's always something to do. You can refocus those to those better ones, and so we typically see really, again, tremendously good savings, often upwards of 75%.
Impressive. Impressive. Again, just a reminder, if you do have a question, feel free to ask it now. So Jamie, what does a typical rollout for IGEL look like?
Yeah, it's actually really simple. You can roll out IGEL even without the UMS, just to test, just to install it. You can get the downloads directly from our website. You put in your information, you get the download. You can make a standard USB boot, thumb drive to go ahead and install it, test it on some hardware. You can test it in a virtual environment too. We support that. And the UMS itself is really about a 5-minute install process. Spin up your Windows server, your Linux server. So we'll support Windows Server 2019, 2022, all the modern ones. We'll support, Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, Enterprise Linux. Doesn't matter to us what you run it on. Whatever your perfect flavor is. It installs in about 5 to 7 minutes with all the default options. You can test it. You can license it up very quickly. All it requires you to do is just create an account where you can register the UMS, so we know that, hey, you're a person who's actually licensed to use this and all of that. It'll give starter licenses for 90 days. So we often find that the most basic of proofs of concept can be done in hours. And then for more extensive ones where we're looking at integration with something like Imprivata, or we're looking at other third-party integrations, between IGEL and Ferroque together, we can really do some good POC work without tremendous cost to the customer.
Outstanding. And I think we have time for just one more question. And Jeremy, I think this one is for you. How would somebody get started with an ROI assessment? Just kind of to get that project rolling.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us by any means necessary, but you certainly can email events@ferroquesystems.com to get in touch with us and start to engage our team. Whether you're in Canada or the United States, we are at your service and ready to engage with your team.
Outstanding. What a great session and what a very valuable topic. Any final thoughts, guys, before we close out for today?
Just want to say thank you so much for having us. Obviously, Ferroque has been a champion of IGEL for a long time. A long proponent of the preventative security model, and really, as Jeremy said, a huge fan of the adaptive secure desktop concept that we've come up with. And it really shows that modernizing requires a partner that understands that understands how these fit together, how to build an ecosystem for your customers, and it's tremendously humbling to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the entire audience today for joining us. We appreciate your time and hope you found this valuable. And we hope to see you on our upcoming webinars coming up next month. So thank you, everybody. And I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.